Good morning, good morning, good morning. BlackDoctors.org, family and friends. I am Dr. Rhonda Mattox, a triple fellowship trained, board certified psychiatrist and president of the Arkansas Medical, Dental, and Pharmaceutical Association. And I am also the host of I'm Not Crazy But. Welcome to this edition of I'm Not Crazy But. I know you're wondering what in the world was she thinking naming that show I'm Not Crazy But. I'm so glad you asked. We are talking about the kinds of things that I hear people say to me on a daily basis. I'm not crazy, but, and then they follow it with something that is a little bit stigmatizing, perhaps they're ashamed of, a little bit taboo. On this show, we navigate mental health issues, emotional wellness issues, and those taboo topics. And today, family, we are talking about let's talk about sex, baby. Now, sex is a three-letter word with a magnanimous impact on people. Although we talk about it frequently, or think about it frequently, many times we don't talk about it frequently. And when we do, we speak about it in hushed tones. Not today. I talk about sex nearly every day with my patients as a psychiatrist because so many of the medications that I prescribe can impact your sex drive or your ability to perform. So today I have some pretty amazing guests on with me, and they are Mr. Ellis Dean, who is who is well known to this audience. He's a director of digital programming and productions at blackdoctor.org. And many of you may not know he is a former counselor. Additionally, we are having with us Dr. Ashley Alexander Booth. She is an Arkansas native who migrated over to Savannah, Georgia, and we will not hold that against her. She is also the founder and medical director of Healing Beyond the Stethoscope Primary Care. So please join me in welcoming them. And as we are setting the stage, go ahead and rep your city, put in there where you're watching from. I know that as we're talking about sex, some of you will not ask your questions because you will be a little bit concerned. So we are trying to anticipate what those questions might be and answer them. But what I will ask you is, if you would, go ahead and share this episode, even before you know if you should or not, because there are some couples in committed relationships who are perhaps struggling. And here's the thing, and I'll just introduce it with this. There are individuals who have not been intimate as frequently as they normally are, or perhaps are not intimate at all. And there may be a partner or two or three who's listening in, not you, of course, who is thinking, I wonder if he finds me attractive. I wonder if she is cheating, those kinds of questions. Well, I want you to understand that may not be the case. There may be some other issues. There may be some stressors. There may be some medical issues. And today, what we're going to talk about is this taboo topic, sex. And we're going to talk about the kinds of things that can be impacting your sex drive, the kinds of things that can be impacting your sexual performance, how to have those conversations with both your partner and your doctor, and how to have a more fulfilling relationship in the sexual arena. Now, I'm going to pose this question. Why is sex such a taboo topic when we think about it so often? And why do we have such an issue discussing sex when it's such a natural thing? Oh, don't all go at once.
I'll crack the label on that one. I think it goes back to kind of the origins of the country in terms of that kind of Puritan, base, religious base about it. And so I think that just kind of permeated through history, and it became, and you still have that kind of super, even though we know people are doing it. We know that porn sites are visited billions of times a year. We know people that sex workers and sex trafficking is happening. We know all of that stuff is happening. It's a multi-billion-dollar industry. we still don't talk about it. It's almost like, when we used to talk about diseases when we were back in the day, you had to whisper it, she has got cancer, so you don't really talk about it, even though it's happening. So I think that it's kind of built into that fabric of kind of our American, mainstream culture, leading back to Puritans that came here and settled.
That is a great point. And as you were talking about that, I thought about my sex talk that my mother had with me. And it boiled down to her being on the phone, telling her friends, Rhonda can talk to me about anything. But anytime I ask a question about what a virgin was, what sex was, it was, who have you been talking to? You need some new friends. And what I learned was, it was not that Rhonda could talk to her about anything. It was that Rhonda could talk to her about no thing that was related to sex. So that puritanical background really does set the stage. Dr. Booth, do you want to add anything else to that?
Looks like she might be frozen.
Okay. All right.
Get her back here shortly.
Well, can you guys hear me okay?
Yes.
Yeah, sure. One of the things that I've noticed is the other issue is puberty. That's one of the stages of our lives that everyone essentially goes through, but we don't have that discussion. A lot of parents and a lot of my friends that I sat down and talked, even people in medical school, talk about certain things, and I was like, you are about to become a physician, and that's not how things work. I was like, talk with you. So I realized that there are gaps in our knowledge base because a lot of times people are finding out things from their friends. There are not a lot of people that I meet who are getting this information from actual adults who are sitting down and talking to them about it. So if the adults are not discussing it, kids are trying to figure it out on their own from their friends. And a 12-year-old talking to a 12-year-old, we can about imagine like how that conversation goes. And so there's a lot of information that can be lost with that. It makes us uncomfortable. We don't know what to say. We know these things are going to happen. So if we're not even going to touch on the basis of just puberty, when are we going to start talking about the other things that go along with that? And so with that, I even talked to people that, like I said, there are some people that I was in medical school with. I was like, wait a minute, hold on. So if they are bringing that to the table, then they may shy away from having that discussion with you as well.
That is a great point. So what I'm hearing you say is not only do parents not talk about sex frequently enough and have that conversation, but doctors may have some reservations based on just how they were parented as well. Interesting. And that makes this conversation around sex and intimacy all the more necessary. So before we get into dive deeply, please let's talk about the difference between sex and intimacy. And we're going to talk about both, but let's set the parameters. What's the difference between sex and intimacy?
Well, I'll start on that. So with sex is just a physical act. And that physical act is going to get you aroused. So some people are like, well, is it like penetration, things of that nature? Technically, the true definition of sex is just, it's an act that causes arousal. And some people want to use sex and intimacy as if they're interchangeable, but they're not. Intimacy is actually a connection with someone. So people can have sex with people that they don't have a connection with. And we've heard of situations where this has happened. So you have to be able to separate the two. There is sexual intimacy because with intimacy, there's different parts of it. You can have physical, emotional, mental, spiritual. So there's all different types of intimacy, and those connections go further and they're deeper, and you're able to relationships with people, and they take time to develop.
And I would say, and on the other end, that they take time to break too. So, whereas, so I think you did a fantastic job of kind of defining the difference. And there is that line. And then when we start talking about gender differences and how we view it, that compartmentalization plays a big role, or the ability to compartmentalize the act of sex with the intimate feelings and all that comes with intimacy. And so, and I think that is a part of the difference. I won't say it's the only difference because we all make choices, but that is part of the difference in when we're talking about gender differences and the views about sex and how we approach sex. So I'm going to speak, I'm going to try to represent the men as much as possible.
Represent.
But absolutely, sex itself is just the act, whereas intimacy does require some level of connection. And Doc talked about those different types of connection that can happen when we're talking about being intimate versus having sex.
And as you were talking, the word that came to mind was vulnerability. And so with connection, many times is vulnerability, is with sharing your heart and that kind of thing. And so that's why a part of sometimes when people will say you committed, you were emotionally, you were infidelity emotionally, and people have, like, wait a minute, what is that? But that is, you made this connection with someone outside of this relationship, and they're feeling very abandoned or upset by that. So that's good. Now, I have people who are in my office who will tell me, I have not had sex with my partner in 3 months, or we've not been romantic sometimes in a year. When that happens, frequently there's this concern of they're not attracted to me anymore. They're cheating on me. What are some other contributors to lack of intimacy or decreased sex?
I think you, Dr. Mattox, I get that as well. Things that I see when it comes to that, going back to what we talked about with intimacy, the first thing is I say we have to look at the relationship. Why? My biggest thing, as I talk to my patients all the time, is the why. So why are you guys not being intimate for this amount of time? Is it because you're not having a connection? Some people just, you're not talking. So because when we talked about connection and building the relationship and being together, that takes time. That also takes communication. And it goes into things deeper, like love languages. Are you exchanging the energy that makes the most sense for you in the relationship? So that's one, like that connection. Is there something going on just in the relationship and how you guys are communicating at that point? Then after that, then we start thinking about some of the medical things. Are you having issues? Is there some kind of medical things that are going on that are contributing to it? There could be medications. There could be some disease processes that are not well controlled that be causing that. There are some mental health issues that could be going on. Are you stressed about this or that? And are those things coming into play? It's all factorial. And so I always say, let's figure out kind of where we are with this, and then look at all the different sides that we have in our in that situation.
Good point.
Yeah, I think for men, I think our sexual desires evolve over time as we get older, and it changes, and so that intimacy must be maintained throughout, because when you're in your teens and 20s, it's the stiff wind and you're ready to go. But when you get older, there needs to be more of a connection, especially if you've had a partner for a long period of time. So you do have to work on that emotional connection in order to stimulate the physical act. And then even then, we might have some, as we age, there might be some erectile dysfunction that's coming into the situation. There might be some blockage. I mean, anywhere ranging from as serious to prostate cancer all the way down to just, simple ED, right? And so we have to, and there's some mental that goes with that too, right? So we're saying, okay, now you're feeling stressed, you might be frustrated by the act because you don't know if you can perform, and so that increases the stress around the act itself. And so, as you know, as a psychiatrist, we start avoiding those behaviors that cause anxiety, right? And so we go from I would try tonight, but I don't know if I can do it. I'm feeling some kind of way about that. So I don't touch my partner. And then that goes from 1 day to 2 days to a week, 2 weeks to a month. And now you're 3 months out because you're just avoiding the behavior altogether instead of dealing with the problem with your partner.
Mm-hmm. And I love the points that you've made. I also ask about stressors and about the balance of responsibility in the home. If you're having work stressors, maybe you come home and you're exhausted. If you come home and you're exhausted and then you have to help the kids with their homework and you have to do this. So are there any things that are going on in the home that are unusual or that are overwhelming? And then also, are there medical conditions? I meet people who are in pain who want to have sex, but I rarely meet people who are in pain who are like, you know what, this back pain. I mean, they may want to, but sometimes the actual ability and commitment to performing in light of chronic pain or those types of conditions can really can be a problem. And I'm glad you brought out erectile dysfunction, because it impacts over 30 million men in the United States and over 100 million men worldwide. And there are some conditions that are associated with erectile dysfunction. And those are, conditions like hypertension, cholesterol issues. And these are issues that are really pronounced in the African American community. And because many times we as a community may not adhere to our medications,
Right.
then uncontrolled diabetes, uncontrolled hypertension, uncontrolled heart disease can really impact your ability to perform. I mean, sex is about blood flow to the penis.
Right.
In men who were born men, let me say it like that. Okay. Right. And so if there's a cardiovascular or circulatory issue, that can definitely impact that. Now, I will say, the way I got interested in this, and a funny story is my very first PowerPoint presentation, I think in 2002 or 2004, was about erectile dysfunction. And midway through the presentation, I couldn't get my slides up. So of course I made the joke, just can't get it up. I thought it was funny. They didn't necessarily get it at the time, but I've been having this conversation for nearly 2 decades now, because there are certain medications that can contribute to more erectile dysfunction. Medications like propranolol, atenolol, Prozac, Effexor, some of the psychiatry medicines that I prescribe. And it's interesting because when I first started approaching the conversation, it was people kind of looking down, and still that happens. But a part of their discomfort was also my discomfort. I looked uncomfortable when I was approaching the subject. And so now I say things like, this may feel a little bit uncomfortable to you to have this discussion, but I realize that people who are not enjoying satisfying sexual relationships because of a medicine I've given them are not likely to stay on that medicine. So I need you to shoot straight with me when we have this conversation. And then I will ask about everything from, their ability to maintain erection, their ability to get an erection. And if they tell me they can't maintain one, I ask about, do you have morning erections? Because that's so common,
Right.
How do you all approach that topic to get the information that you need to get from your patients about if they're having satisfying sexual relationships? Or do you let them just bring it up?
No, you have to, I'm a big fan of calling out the elephant in the room, right? And so if we know that a patient is on a medication that can cause some sexual kind of malfunction or dysfunction, you've got to call it out, right? Because they may or may not do it. They may just disappear. You don't know what's happening. So they just, like you said, they just not adherent with the medication. And then that could cause more problems because there's a reason why they're on that medication. And so I like that you talked about other conditions, including hypertension and cholesterol and all these other conditions that could have an impact. So we can tell them, it's a medical thing, and then that can alleviate some of the mental stress or pressure around, not being able to perform. And then you can have that, you might be want to bring the partner in and have that group discussion in a space that's safe, because at home that can lead to flare-ups and arguments and more avoidance and more issues. But if you come to a place in your office where it's safe and to have that discussion and then give them the language to speak to each other, then that also helps. If I could add one other piece for men, since I'm here representing all
Please
black,
represent the
I would say that for Black men in particular, since we're here on Black Doctor, is um, the perception of Black men, right? And how we were kind of conditioned in this country, right? And so there is this narrative about being hypersexual, dynamic,
masculine.
masculine, hyper masculine. There's that piece of it that we all carry, whether we want to carry it or not. That's part of kind of the Black male narrative. And some men have like, oh yeah, we don't, we're not the other side. We're not violent and lazy, but we're good in bed, right? And we hold on to that piece because that is self-affirming to our ego and things like that. But if you start to have some sort of dysfunction, if you start to have some sliding where you're not able to perform, you're not able to maintain an erection, that really flies against this hypermasculinity, hypersexuality image that is portrayed in everything we do in society. And so therefore that could really be problematic to have a conversation about it, because now not only are you dealing with it, personally, but then you're going to tell everybody that I'm not fitting this great narrative about Black men. So there's another layer on top of that can make it even more difficult to have that conversation.
Absolutely. And here's the thing. While we may not be having the conversation, we're living it. I think the literature bears out that men in their 40s are 40%, 40% of the men in their 40s are likely to have erectile dysfunction. 50% of men in their 50s. And so it continues to go up. So whether we're talking about it or not, it's happening. And then the research shows that men who have challenges in that area of performance report a diminished sense of being a man, are more likely to report increased depression or decreased self-worth, and just embarrassment and feeling stigmatized, as you mentioned. And one of the things that I didn't say about Dr. Booth when I was introducing her. And for those of you who are just tuning in, we are talking about sex. We imagine we may not get a lot of likes and loves during this episode and probably not a lot of comments. But what I will ask is if you will share this, because if I'm telling you that 50% of men in their 50s are likely to have erectile dysfunction, but they're not likely to talk about it. If you would share this so that when nobody's watching, they can just click on the button and listen, you will be doing some relationships in your circle a big favor. So please do that, even if you choose not to like or comment today. But what I was going to say is the reason that that Dr. Booth and I started having this conversation is because she was a director of a men's health clinic. Tell us about what you were doing there. So she was dealing a lot with erectile dysfunction, a lot, and the treatment side. And so we definitely want to talk about the treatment options that extend, past Viagra or Cialis.
Sure. So that opportunity presented itself in an interesting way for me. So I'll tell you a little backstory. When I was going through medical school and even residency, I wasn't terribly comfortable talking to individuals about their sexual health and things of that nature, especially the men. It was twofold, because even when I tried to approach it with some men, I think because I looked younger than I actually was, they would say, "I'm not talking to you about that. I won't discuss that with you." So I'd gotten that a few times, and I was like, understood. So I don't think I'm going to talk that much about it. So then I would send them to urology, and then they would get there and they come back to me and I say, "Okay, what did they talk to you about? What was the discussion?" And they say, "Oh, he just gave me some medicine." I was like, "No, but what did you talk about?" And they said, "We didn't really talk about it. They just said, take this and then call me back if it doesn't work." And I was like, okay, this is not working. So I got a chance to be a medical director of this men's health clinic. Now, when the guys hired me, they didn't know if they wanted me to be there, because they said, "Oh, you're a woman. We don't don't think the men are you because they're probably going to feel ashamed talking to you about this. So we will hire you on a trial basis. And I said, okay, sure, that's fine. And what they realized is that the men were actually very comfortable talking to me about it. And I don't know if it's because if they went to a male, having to have that discussion with the male, I don't know if they felt like this man is going to judge me. I'm supposed to you said earlier, like, men have this macho thing. So you're always supposed to perform. You're always supposed to be able to do the things. And so now I can't do it. And I'm supposed to share this with this other person who probably is still able to do it. Like there be some comfort. So I got really comfortable talking to the men about it. And I approached it as a health issue, which it is. And once I had let them know, hey, these are the reasons why you're probably having this, and this is how we're going to approach it. They got a lot more comfortable with me, started to discuss a lot more information. And then we started to talk about some of if they were having issues with diabetes and high blood pressure. I got a chance to talk to them about that. I got a chance to counsel them on some of them would come into our clinic. And what we were doing later about some of the treatment options that we had. But they were like, okay, just fix me, make me well, and then I'll start performing. I was like, but if you haven't been performing for a few weeks or months, and then you start trying to perform again with their significant other, they're going to say, hold up, what have you been doing? And who have you been doing it with? Because all of a sudden now, they're going to say, all of a sudden now, they're like, oh, I feel good. Like I'm great. And I was like, no, because if you go home and you haven't been doing anything, and then all of a sudden you're on ready and you can go, they're gonna start questioning that. So I was like, you need to have a discussion with them about what's about to happen, the treatment options that you're considering, and how it can help. And once they did that, started having those conversations with their significant other, they would bring them into the office, we would get them on the phone. It started to help with that dialogue and started talking about like intimacy again, started talking about intimacy and that connection. And then I told them then that can also help with the treatment process.
Mm-hmm. And one other thing, as you're talking about this, that came to my mind is making sure that you create a safe place to have the conversation as well. And one of the things that you don't want to do is to weaponize the information that your partner gives you when you're in a heated discussion, and that can then compromise future vulnerable moments. So as you are approaching this conversation, set the stage. And I will say that there are men who may initiate the conversation, but many times men may not initiate the conversation. It may be a partner that initiates the conversation about it, because the person who's actually impacted by the erectile dysfunction can find themselves really ashamed of it and feeling less than. And so let's also have the conversation about how to approach this conversation. And I'll start with choosing the time that you have the conversation wisely. And whatever you do, do not lead with let's talk. Anybody who's in a relationship know that those two words immediately will set off the defenses of the other person, and there will be no talking that happens as much as a defensive conversation. So wait until it's not right after work. You are not just out of an argument, and it's a quiet time, a relaxing time for everybody involved. And then set the stage for for the talk by leading with love. I really value our relationship. I'm very attracted to you, and I've noticed recently that we've not been as intimate as in times past. I don't want to make any assumptions, and so let's talk about what's been happening. And I say that, and not, are you having problems with erectile dysfunction? Are you cheating on me? Because those lead to yes or no answers. But if you say, tell me more, or tell me about that, then you have no idea what may come out of that. And a wide range of things can come out of it, from I'm having stress at work to I'm really tired, I'm exhausted, and we're having this conversation around men. But let me just say, women may talk about some things as to why their drive is lower as well. it's 10 o'clock by the time I get the kids in bed and finish homework and finish cooking, and and things can come out. So how do you have that conversation with them if you're concerned because it's not happening in the way that you think it should, or the way you would like, or the frequency you would like? Oh, I see you smiling, Ellisteen.
No, I'm just, it's interesting. I was, what came to mind was, as important as what you say, it's how you say it, right? So if the body language, the tone, all of that plays in a role. So especially if you're there, you're having a conversation. So you do this and you say, well, what's going on? Tell me what's going on.
Mm-hmm.
That's different than
Mm-hmm.
being open, leaning in, having a softer tone and saying, help me understand, what's going on. I really do value this in our relationship, right? So there is, you have to kind of balance both of that. I like creating a safe space, but in that safe space, the hardest thing that for both partners to do is you have to think about the needs of what the other person might be experiencing, right? And so you don't know what they're going to say. So what we have to do is exercise some empathy in that moment and say, okay, I've got to be prepared and be okay with whatever comes out of their mouth. Even the worst thing that could be, I'm no longer attracted to you, right? And so that could be the worst. So prepare yourself for that, but you've got to be open and willing to hear that, because if you're there with your agenda, and this is you asking that question as part of your agenda, your partner may pick up on that, and then that can lead down a very, very very bad path in terms of this conversation.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And one of the things that I will add is when people come to me and we're having this conversation, or when I lead off and I ask about it, because if people come to me on certain medicines, I inquire about it. And one of the things that I will talk about is, when did this begin? Okay. And have you started any new medications recently? Are there any stressors that are happening? Have there been any losses, any deaths in your family, any breakups, any really stressful things that have happened? And I frequently will, get some lab work. I want to know, are there any endocrine abnormalities? Is there diabetes that's untreated? Is there thyroid, are there thyroid conditions? And so I lead with that. And I do not assume that it's in their head, because many times people will lead with, this is in your head. You are not attracted to me. We are fighting. We don't like each other, those kinds of things. And
Right.
it can be those kinds of things, but it's much more complicated than that. And we spent a lot of time on the men, but I also want to leave enough room so that we can talk about sex after menopause, sex after a hysterectomy. From a woman's perspective, that can be. But Dr. Booth, I do want to give you the opportunity to talk about when you were having the conversations about what to say to the spouse or the partner. Tell us a little bit about what that looks like.
So when I would, it actually included a lot of what you guys said, having that protected time, that, hey, I want to talk to you about something important. I know you say, oh, don't say the let's talk thing, but sometimes I think if people understand, hey, they really want to talk to me about something, it's a time where, hey, I don't need you to be on the phone. We don't need to have the TV on. Like, we need to just have some time for ourselves to kind of just discuss some things, because I've noticed things going on, and also framing it as, like you said, like, I love you, I care about you. These are some things that I've noticed. I'm just concerned. Talk to me about it, and leave it. And as you're leaving it open, like you said, one of the things I really like too is being receptive. So you may come in, don't try to come in with your agenda. Oh, I know he's cheating, or I know she's doing this, whatever. Be open to what they're saying, because there's a lot of what they said versus what you heard, because you're filtering it through your agenda sometimes. And they're like, that's not what I said though. That's not what I said.
Right.
So being able to be open to actually hearing what they said, so that way you can truly have that conversation.
Oh, I love it. I love it. And I will say, as you are having that conversation, pay attention, as Ella said, it bears repeating. Pay attention to your body language. Don't have your legs folded. Don't try not to have a mean mug on your face or whatever. Try to look
Right.
warm and inviting and concerned, and to make sure that you are not listening, waiting to speak and not listening to them. You really, in with this kind of conversation, want to be aware. And then also, when you're talking about going to get this worked up, because this can be a reflection of cardiovascular disease, diabetes, sedentary lifestyle, age, smoking, injuries to like the pelvic area, obesity, high blood pressure, high cholesterol, a wide range of things, depression. Making it a point to say, to lead with love. I love you and I want you to be here. And while I value our intimacy, the most important thing to me is your health. So this can be a symptom of something that's much bigger, and we want to get this addressed earlier than later. Anything else you want to add to that?
Well, I just wanted to offer, so if I see Daryl, thanks for watching and being active there in the comment section. For men, there are some foods, there's some things that we can eat that can help with erectile dysfunction. There's a few foods that watermelon is very good, dark chocolate, oysters, pistachios, salmon, leafy greens, carrots, pumpkin seed, those things like that you can eat, and that can help your body. Um, kind of work through if you're experiencing some erectile dysfunction. I would also throw alcohol in the mix. I know when you're younger, alcohol, that it felt like a stimulant for sexual behaviors and actions. But as we get older, our bodies change. The way we process alcohol changes as we get older, and so therefore that could become a hindrance. There's a common colloquial term, I'm not going to say it here on the show, that talks about when you've had too much to drink and what it could do to your ability to get and maintain an erection. And so you have to kind of think about those things, particularly as we get older, for men as we get older. So all of those things are becoming a factor. So I would say, if you're relatively healthy and don't have any of those cardiovascular issues that Dr. Mattox is talking about, try some of these foods. It could be your diet. There's like a lot of greasy foods, a lot of sugars, things like that could be really impacting that ability. So start eating cleaner and check yourself in the morning. If when you get that morning, if you're starting to find that yourself having that morning erection, then you're in a space where your body's physically responding. And then now it's about, okay, let me work with my partner in terms of, building this intimacy that we talked about earlier in the program. Let's build this intimacy, because intimacy can be lost if you are avoiding sexual contact. And so if there's been a period of inactivity, then you might want to build that intimacy back up and then start engaging in sexual intercourse at that time.
Absolutely. And think of your foreplay as happening not at the time that you're ready, but throughout the day. And let me tell you, fellas, if you're listening in, there's nothing sexier to a woman than a man running a vacuum cleaner or a dishwasher, honey. And so yeah, I love what
What do your
Ellis
kids
brought.
say? Say less. Say less.
Say let's do more. Tell us. Start this conversation beforehand. Help those babies with their homework so she is not overwhelmed. I had to cook up something yesterday. My husband's stock went up when I got home. I mean, that food was good. Not just it was, he had cooked with love, family. It was good to the last drop. I had a couple of servings. I had so many servings. He was like, mind your business. Mind your business, okay? So
Take it as a compliment.
Absolutely. So there are, certain foods that people think of as testosterone enhancing. Let's talk. Let's have the hormone talk from the men's side as well as the women's side. Women, I cannot just have this whole conversation be about erectile dysfunction when most of you who are listening in are perhaps women. Now you share it because, like I said, the fellows may not, but let's talk about the hormones, because I have people come in and ask me, can you check my testosterone levels? So let's talk about testosterone. Let's talk about, we did not answer the question around what exists other than a pill. Because maybe the pills don't work. I have had some men that say Viagra doesn't work, Cialis doesn't work. What's next? Dr.
I'll
Booth, that
talk a
question
little
is
bit
for
on
you.
that because that was a lot of what I did. Sure, go ahead. I'm sorry, Dr. Rhonda.
I said that question was for you.
Oh, okay, great. So one of the things there was a lot of what I did in the men's health clinic, and you're right. A lot of people come in and say, "Let's do the hormones." And before I get into a lot of that with the hormones, the one thing that I must say, because I see this a lot, we unfortunately like want to close our eyes to everything else that's going on, the high blood pressure, the diabetes. And Ellis did a great job talking about like diet and eating clean, because that is the thing that we have to focus on. We have to make sure that we are in the best possible. So if there's an issue with diabetes or high blood pressure or cholesterol, any of those things, we have to make sure that they are welcome. Someone reach out to me, and I've had this happen several times. Their disease process is not well controlled. They're not taking the medicines, all the things, right? But then they say, "Can you check my hormones?" And I was like, it's likely not the hormones. It's probably because these things are not where they need to be. So we have to make sure that those things are under control. Because a lot of times I'll check that hormone, I'll check the testosterone or the estrogen, things like that. And that comes back and is perfectly fine. And I'm like, okay, now we need to address this because this has not been under control. And once we get it under control, then your body will respond better, because it's about, like you said, getting the blood flow there. And a lot of these disease processes can affect the blood flow and blood getting to where it needs to go. So now I've said that there are treatment options. There is, like you said, the pills. We have Viagra and Cialis. When I tell people, sometimes over time, we can get to the maximum dose and you just kind of plateau. You taper off, and that's the end of it. And then they're like, now what? There are some injectables. A lot of people are not happy or open to that, which I understand, because having to inject yourself in the penile area, you're like, what else you got? There are pumps. So there are pumps. There's external pumps that you can use. They also have surgical pumps that can be implanted, and you have the implant. And then there's this technology that I really was excited about and that we did in our health clinic, was they call shockwave or acoustic wave, which I like that term a little bit better, acoustic wave therapy. And basically what its job is to regenerate. So you have these, it's vibrations, and there's some pretty significant vibrations, but it's essentially painless. Could have some discomfort, but there are no needles or anything like that involved. It's just a device that gives this pulsing in these vibrations to the penile area. And its job is to pretty much help with regeneration and revascularization of those vessels so that you can have more blood flow. That's the whole point.
Okay,
Is
I
to
need you
try
to say that
to
in everyday people language. So
oh sure.
revascularization. Tell us
So
what. Tell tell your sixth grade child what you just said.
well, I don't know if I'll tell the sixth grade child, but I'll
Okay, tell your senior in high school
Yeah.
who can't read what you just said.
I got you. So what basically is, sometimes you can have a blockage, right? And what it can do, especially if you have cholesterol, because this is the thing, the blood vessels in that area are really small. And that's why I tell people a lot of times what makes the news are the heart attacks, the strokes. You know how big the heart is and the vessels that run into that? They're another vessel a heart attack. But still, the thing that doesn't make the news is erectile dysfunction. But that is what's happening probably more often than the heart attacks and the strokes. And that doesn't make the news because, again, we don't want to talk about it, but people are having issues with it because, again, it's blood flow. So what can happen is you can have a blockage. And so when they do those vibrations, tap, 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 it helps to open it up. The other thing is, if it can't open it up, what it's going to do is help it to grow. So the revascularization and stuff. So it's going to help it to grow other blood vessels. So then if we can't open this, maybe we can help create some new ones that can help increase the flow. So that's essentially the job of it. And we had quite a few patients that had some success from it and we're doing well. And they usually do about 6 to 8 treatments in the beginning. And then you come back for like some touch ups, 6 months, 12 months. And people were really satisfied with that, because after you have that and you're getting that flow back, then you don't need your Viagra, you don't need your Cialis. Sometimes they will pair those medicines to help with it in the time frame, because those medicines' job is basically what? To open up the blood vessels so that we can get blood flow. So when you add that with that technology, it starts to help. And then the other thing that they started to add to it is PRP. That's platelet rich plasma. PRP is being used for a lot of different things. People are getting it for sports injuries, even people that have hair loss, especially like at the temples and stuff, they're starting to do that. It's the same thing. It's starting to help those cells help to grow and do that whole growth process and stimulate growth again. And that's what it does in that area. So it says, okay, we're having issues with blood flow. We need some help with blood vessels and stuff. Maybe we can use this and it is going to help this area grow, get the blood vessels, get the blood flow so that you can have what you need.
Great points. Now, for those of you who are just tuning in, if you've not gathered, we're talking about sex. We're talking about intimacy throughout different periods of your life. And for those who think that they or perhaps their partner has erectile dysfunction, I want you to Google the term International Index of Erectile Function. International Index of Erectile Function. And it's basically a self-administered questionnaire that asks you about how often you're able to get an erection during sexual activity, when you actually have erections after stimulation, are you hard enough to penetrate when you attempt sex, how often were you able to penetrate or enter your partner. And it'll go through this list of questions so that you can print that off, complete it, hand it to your doctor when you go in, and not and then lead with that. But if you are not having satisfying sexual relationships and intimacy with your partner or your spring fling or whatever it is that you're doing, your situation, okay, and this is concerning to you, I want you to have a language, because many times we don't even have the language to have the conversation, and that's really important. And what we're trying to do is set the stage. Now, ladies, don't get us, because now we're okay. Go ahead.
So Rhonda, I wanted to just add in there too that this technology, the acoustic wave therapy, goes by different names. There's different brand names out there. Your regular doctor may not know about this, because not everybody is trained on it. Not everybody is familiar with it. There are some other like specialized doctors that are doing it. There are some urologists that are starting to tap into it. I knew of one urologist that was like, oh yeah, this is fabulous, this is awesome. So he started to do it as an extra for his patients. But if you walk into your office, a doctor's office, and say, hey, I want to try that thing that she said on there, they may not know about it. So you may have to find like a freestanding clinic that will offer it. More doctors are just found out about this technology about 3 years ago. It's been out for several years. It started in Europe. So I started to do the research and everything on it. It's legit. People are seeing the results. So I would just say, if your doctor says, I don't know nothing about that, that must be, I don't know about that. Don't be discouraged, because if you just put it in acoustic wave therapy, again, it goes under some other different brand names. But if you put that in, there are a lot of other physicians that are doing them kind of in a freestanding clinic, and it may not be offered directly with your doctor's office.
And when we first started having this conversation, some of this was not FDA approved, and in the last few years has become FDA approved. And so your primary care doc who's in their 60s may not be aware of this, and you can type Google and that kind of stuff to see who's doing it. The other piece is you may want to get referred to a urologist who keeps in contact with your primary care doc. Okay. Absolutely.
Look, we've talked about men for 50 minutes. Let's talk about these women.
Listen, absolutely. But the interesting thing is that women will come in and will initiate the conversation with me about this medicine has decreased my sex drive. My husband is complaining, my partner is complaining, or whatever. And they will initiate the conversation. Men, on the other hand, at least the men that I serve, let me put that caveat, the men that I serve, it's like, I got to do a dental extraction. I have to coax it out of them. It's not coming. So I make no apologies for 50 minutes on men because of how difficult it is in my office to get them to even admit that there is an issue. And I'll say, if I know you said no, but if you change your mind and you want to have this conversation later, then we can. And some people later will have a conversation. Now, pivoting on along, women, thank you. Thank you for leaning in. Sex after rape, sex after menopause, sex after, there can be a number of reasons why women are reluctant to have sex. Sex after children, sex after work, those kinds of things. There sometimes after a woman has a baby and had, then there, family.
I don't know what happened.
Listen,
I think the program went down
technology age.
At first, I thought it was bad, and I was like, well, I know the show would keep going if it was just mine. Y'all could have kept going more. And I said everybody was gone. That was the platform. So we're back.
We're back. Technology at its finest.
I think that's a sign. We should be talking about women. I think that's a sign.
You know what, Dean? You may be right. And we are going to end right here and come back for a whole episode for women. That is perhaps what the universe is trying to do.
Plug out in the wall. We talk about women. No, click.
All right. But you know what? I will take my cue from the universe and wrap it up and say, we'll come back and talk about sex and women during a future episode. As we are wrapping up,
Valentine's Day. Let's do that around Valentine's Day. That should be fun.
look. As we are wrapping up, we will be back. I have episodes already planned, so I won't tell you it's Valentine's Day, but we will be back in the month of February, and I will let you know. We'll post it. Go ahead and like blackdoctor.org on Facebook so you can get those updates. You can go to Dr. Rhonda Mattox on Facebook so you can get those updates, and Dr. Booth has hers as well. As we're wrapping up, I'm going to give you all the opportunity to share for a minute or two a nugget or a gem that you wanted to share that we didn't get around to letting you share.
I'll go first. I want our guests to kind of close us out. I would say that when I was talking earlier about the foods, men, we live in a microwave society, right? We want things to be. We start something, we change something, we want it to work right away. It's not a right away thing. It took us a while to get to develop bad habits. It's going to take our bodies a while to adjust. So if you go and you eat a salad for lunch and expect it's not going to work that way. So give yourself some time, give yourself some grace, but you have to stick to it. You have to be steadfast and determined about what you're going to do if you're trying to handle it on your own. And then I would say find a if you're not close with your primary care physician, find somebody that you can have a real conversation with. They're whether your close circle of friends, and I know men, we have a hard time sharing. So I get that piece, but it is letting a problem linger is going to be more problematic, pun intended, if you the longer you let it sit. Attack it, get to it, and find some solutions together with your partner so you can continue to have a both fulfilling relationship, both intimately and physically.
Great points. Dr. Booth.
Yeah, I would just like to say, just make sure that you keep in mind that sexual health is health, period. Like the kids say, it is health, period. And that there are some benefits to sexual health, to having a healthy sexual lifestyle. And so make sure that, like Ellis said, that you have a good relationship with your primary care doctor, that you feel that you have a relationship good enough where you can have these conversations, because that's important, so that they'll know what to do for you and to truly have a conversation about it. And then have those conversations with your partner, increase your intimacy, find out their love language, figure out where you guys are having a disconnect so that you can become together again. The last thing that I would like to say is just staying on top of your a lot of things that we know can contribute to this. So prevention is always my key for everyone. So if you're smoking, please stop. If you're drinking too much alcohol, please stop. Start exercising. It's a little cool out now, but we're starting to get into that spring weather, and people are gonna, spring is here, everything is out. So take advantage of it. Get active, ride your bike, do some walks, exercise, because all of those things are going to make sure that you are well overall. And thank you so much, Dr. Rhonda, for having me on today.
Oh, it is my pleasure. And I want to remind you all, if you are having these challenges, think about the context that you're having these challenges in, particularly if there's been a recent death, a loss of a job, some economic or financial stressors. Consider getting a therapist individually and collectively for family therapy so you can work through some of the issues that may be contributing, because we like to think of it as black or white, as this or that, when it can be both and having a fresh set of ears to help you navigate that communication in a loving way can really be beneficial to the unit and to the individual. And I will just, love to say, step outside of your comfort zone and make an impact. Next week, we will be talking about the talk that is challenging. And this time we will be talking about the talk that many parents are having to have with their Black boys in order to ensure that they get home safely. So set your alarms, set your clocks, set your calendars, mark the date, 11 a.m. Central Standard Time, 12 p.m. Eastern Time, Ellis. Every Thursday. But we are talking next week with our, particularly our parents and those who love little Black boys, on how to navigate their way back home when they find themselves in situations. This is certainly an episode that you do not want to miss. So I hope that you will come. Daryl Stewart, Latina Watkins, and all of you who stayed to the end, we appreciate you. Please share, share, share. If you joined us in midstream, shame on you. You really missed out. But go ahead and share this to yourself, even if you just share privately and don't let anybody else see it, so you can go back and watch it. This is
You can save it. You can save it to your personal and go back and watch it. Dr. Booth, does a man have to do? There's a question from YouTube. Does a man have to do anything? Does he have to get his levels checked before they start that ultra wave therapy, or can they just go ahead and have a conversation? Can they start it right away?
Oh, that is a great question. We would do a full assessment. So we would do a history and physical. We would do labs, see where they were to make sure that that therapy was appropriate for them. We would check the medications that they were already on. If they were on things like blood thinners, things of that nature, we would say, okay, is this still going to be appropriate for you? So it's a full assessment. So long story short, a lot of times we would check the blood work to make sure if they had some blood work that was done by a previous provider within a relatively short period of time, 30 to 60 days, then we would look at that and see if we needed to add anything additional to it, and then make the full assessment on whether or not they would benefit from the therapy. That was a great question.
And
Yep.
I love you
Don't
all
go run
because
to those clinics. Don't go run to those clinics and just having it done if you haven't been checked out. Basically, that's what you said in a
Right.
very nice way. Don't run to those clinics.
yeah, and I love you all. I have a question that they didn't post publicly, but what are antidepressants that don't contribute to sexual dysfunction? And they are Remeron, also known as mirtazapine, and Wellbutrin, also known as bupropion. Those are at least two of the antidepressants that do not contribute to decreased sex drive. And people want to know that. Now, one of them can increase your appetite and one of them can decrease your appetite. So you want to be well aware of that as well. But I want to let you know what we are not telling you is to go ditch your blood thinners, to go ditch your blood pressure medicines or some of your heart medicines, because they can lead to decreased interest. What we are telling you is to have a conversation with your doctors and your pharmacists and ask, am I on any medications that could contribute to a decreased interest or decreased ability to perform? And then you modify accordingly. Don't just stop cold turkey. And certainly don't tell them Dr. Mattox told you to do that. I did not. This is for educational and informational purposes only. Have a great one. I'll see you same time, same place.
Get your prostate checked. Don't be afraid just because there has been prostate cancer treatment has been associated with erectile dysfunction. Please get your prostate checked. You'd rather be alive and worry about erectile dysfunction than let a very treatable cancer take your life because you don't want to have erectile dysfunction. Please, please, please get your PSA, get your prostate checked. Black men, particularly, go get checked.
Yes. Bye, family. Same time, same place next week. Bye-bye.